And we're kicking off this video with stairs. This is something that a lot of you have probably heard of before. There have been many stories and images surfacing online of people, as well as park rangers, coming across stairs in the middle of the forest, leading to some pretty surreal, haunting kind of images. These stairs are often found deep in the woods and can be made of a variety of materials, including concrete and wood. The stairs appear to have been constructed by human hands and appear to be in rather good condition, even though they are often located in areas where there are no buildings or signs of human activity. A supposed paranormal stories surrounding these stairs suggest that they are haunted or cursed, and that those who climb them are doomed to a terrible fate. Some claim that the stairs are remnants of long abandoned structures, while others believe that they are portals to other dimensions or the work of supernatural entities. And I gotta say, I mean, just seeing stairs in the middle of a forest, that would be pretty eerie for me too. I'd be just a little bit freaked out. The search for the missing teens. Reddit user Genesis Pro Tech shared this story. There had been a group of teenagers who went on a camping trip but did not return at the scheduled time. Worried about their safety, Genesis Pro Tech and his good friend, along with a search and rescue professional who knew the area well, were called to assist with the search efforts. After hiking for most of the day and covering about 35 kilometers into the woods, the search party began to notice some strange things. They came across sticks that were carved into spears and stuck in the ground, odd carvings on the trees, and a child's stuffed animal hanging from a tree. These items were all freshly carved, indicating that someone had been in the area recently. The thing is, this wasn't on any of the regular trails in the area, and it was far from any roads. Despite their growing unease, the search party continued to hike through the woods, hoping to find the missing teenagers. As night fell, they set up camp, still on edge from the unsettling things they'd seen earlier, and after a restless night, they woke up at dawn and prepared to continue the search. While packing up the gear though, they found a piece of ripped clothing and some shoe prints nearby. They thought, hey, maybe they were close to finding the missing teens. But then they received a radio call that the teenagers had been found about 20 kilometers away to the east, and that they were calling the search party back. They were pretty relieved about the teens being found, but understandably shaken at the same time. What was all that stuff they'd come across in the middle of nowhere? Next up, we have stalked by a cougar. A Redditor by the name of Smokey the Marshmallow shared what they described as the scariest incident they had experienced as a park ranger. In Washington state, the ranger had been hiking up an unpopular trail leading to an old shelter where he had a strange feeling he was being watched. Although he had seen fresh cougar scratches and droppings along the trail, which were common in the area, he wasn't worried at first. That night, he camped at the shelter, which had only 3 walls and a roof. He felt a little uneasy throughout the night and didn't sleep much. In an attempt to feel safer, he arranged his emergency foil tarp around his sleeping bag, hoping to hear something if it approached him as he slept. The next day, the ranger found fresh cougar droppings and scratches on the trail he had hiked on. He continued on the trail and found a mostly eaten deer in some dense brush just off the trail. This was an indication that this cougar was nearby, and the ranger began to feel pretty uneasy, as you could probably imagine, given he was at least 13 miles away from civilization. As a result, he decided to just shorten his 3-day trip and quickly made his way out of the area. Probably a smart idea. Badlands National Park, located in South Dakota, is considered to be one of the most haunted places in the United States. Many visitors and park rangers have reported paranormal activities in the park, including ghostly sightings and eerie sounds. The area is known for its rugged terrain, deep canyons, and eroded rock formations, which have become the perfect setting for various ghost stories. It is also home to a dark history of violence and tragedy, leading to many rumors of possible paranormal activity. The area was once a haven for outlaws and bandits as well, who would often take refuge in the rugged landscape. It's rumored that the spirits of these notorious criminals still haunt the park, with visitors reporting strange noises, apparitions, and just feelings of being watched. Visitors have also reported strange lights and unexplained sounds and eerie shadows within the park.
Next up at number 6 now, we have the jungle spirit. Now, do you guys believe in the spirits living in trees? If you don't, you might find this one interesting. It comes from Reddit user Morgan Explosion, who said, I was working at a survey station deep in the Malaysian jungle in Borneo, 4 hours in 4x4s to reach this spot from the nearest village. I was sleeping in one of the dorms with some of the rangers we were working with, 5 people total in the dorm. That night, I was having a nightmare and woke up at about 2 AM to the sound of footsteps outside. Whatever it was fairly big and sounded bipedal. It stopped right outside the window, so I'm staring back at the window trying hard to see. It was pitch black in the whole station since it runs on solar power and the batteries give out around midnight. Suddenly, one of the rangers shifted in her bed, making a noise, and I could hear whatever it was running away quite fast. Being a rather skeptical person in general, I woke up and asked the rangers the next day about it. They adamantly believed that it was a jungle spirit coming to check us out. The station stood on stilts, so the window sits about 10 feet off the ground. I asked about the possibility of it being a wild animal, but they said the only thing big enough to make that large of a footprint would have been a sun bear or a cloud leopard. They said it's generally unheard of for those animals to make it that close to the survey station since there are usually people milling about. The rangers have heard the footsteps before and they firmly believe that a jungle spirit was roaming about the site. Moving on to number 5 now, we have missing teens. This one comes from Genesis Pro Tech. This story is a reminder to not always jump to conclusions. They said there was a group of teens that hadn't been heard from after their scheduled return time from a camping trip. A good friend and I knew the area very well, so one of the search team and rescue guys we're friends with called us in to assist in the search. Him and I head out in the general direction the teens had set off in. We'd been hiking for almost a day and we'd seen nothing. We're about 35 kilometers into the woods at this point when we start noticing odd things. Sticks carved like spears stuck into the ground, weird carvings on the trees, a child's stuffed animal hanging from a noose up in a tree. This place was nowhere near any roads. It wasn't even on the regular trails people would go on in the area. The really eerie thing was that everything was freshly carved. Somebody had been there within a couple of hours of us and made these things. Mind you, we're still looking for these teens. We kept on hiking and eventually made camp for the night, still kind of on edge from what we had seen earlier, but we settle down anyway and go to sleep. We get up with the sunrise, hoping to cover more ground before it gets too hot. We pack up the gear and get ready to go when I noticed a bit of shirt that had caught on a small tree and ripped along with some shoe prints. We were thinking, great, maybe we're close to the teens, when a radio call comes through. The teens had just been found 20 kilometers east of us and they're calling everybody back from the search. All those weird things we had seen from the day before came flooding back into my mind. We wasted no time hiking out of those woods. Next up at number 4 now, we have the crowbar. This one came from Reddit user Tinge of the Ginge, which is a great name, I must say. This one sounds more like an actual horror movie though. They said, I'm a field biologist and my job takes me to some fairly remote places. I have 2 favorite stories. The first was the time I was surveying a remote restoration site near an old trail and heard someone walking up a nearby path. All the hair on the back of my neck stood on end, so I grabbed all my stuff and started casually walking down the trail like I belonged there. I turned the corner and there was a shirtless guy swinging a crowbar around in circles, and when he saw me he started yelling, I've got a crowbar, I've got a crowbar. I think I nodded at him, squeaked something like nice crowbar, and then ran the mile or so back to my truck. And that's the reason why I always carry mace and a big knife now. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the head. This one comes from Reddit user RipeOTCDXVI. They're actually a ranger at Yellowstone National Park. That's the one that looks amazing, but it could blow up at any moment and end humanity. Yeah, that one. Anyway, they said, a couple weeks ago I was exploring the Lamar Valley, about 11 miles from the nearest road and even further to the park boundary. There, in the middle of the trail, is a perfectly severed deer head. No blood, no raggedness at the severance, perfectly intact. Now this is weird because I have seen wolf and bear kills and I used to find cougar kills in SD with radio tracking just after the cougar made them. This was not any of those things. This head was completely uneaten, eyes tongue, everything was intact. Even the ravens hadn't touched it yet. No catching, no scat, right in the middle of the trail, but again, no blood. Even a human doing it made no conventional sense. It was a doe, so it had no antlers, plus why leave it in the trail? The whole thing, even in broad daylight, gave me chills. Just an ocean of waving grass, bison calmly grazing, and a perfectly clean deer head right on the path. Moving on to number 2 now, we have the howling. This one comes from Reddit user Jax Mac. He said, I have seen weird lights, heard weird sounds, found weird stuff in the woods before, but the one that sticks out was years ago. I was camping at a friend's property in South Texas. I am asleep in my tent, and all of a sudden I wake up in the middle of the night. One of those from dead sleep to wide awake in half a second moments. I can feel something outside the tent, but I don't want to look. I have considerable camping, hiking experience, so I'm not freaking out too badly. I very slowly unzip the top of the tent, being as quiet as I can. I look out of the tent, and there is very little light. We were camped under a giant oak tree, so big the branches dipped down and connected with the ground before growing back up again. It is a huge tree, and there are lots of shadows and weird shapes. Anyway, as my eyes start to adjust, I realize there are about 40 or more coyotes all milling around the campsite, just slowly walking around, sniffing here and there, almost ghost-like in their quietness. I slowly zipped the flap back up and laid there for about 30 minutes before I fell back to sleep. In the morning, in the light, you couldn't tell anything had been there. The next night we heard the pack howling for hours in the distance. That was almost freakier than seeing them 10 feet away. And finally, number 1 now, we have burnt. This one comes from Reddit user Beer and Oxytocin. It's pretty grim, so maybe skip this last one if you're very squeamish. They said, I'm a ranger, a non-peace officer, and I work at a pretty remote desert park. This happened before I got there, but the other rangers I work with were there. They went to do a patrol during summer, our off-season, at one of our seldom used campgrounds. On a patrol, our maintenance ranger found a burnt out car on one of the many sites. The desert is a weird place, so he just calls the sheriff and waits. The sheriff arrives, and it turns out there's a body in the driver's seat with no arms and no legs, just a torso and head burnt. The sheriffs just marked it as a suicide and removed the vehicle. We are close to Mexico and get a lot of illegal drug traffic coming through, so I guess they don't even bother trying to solve those. Super sketchy.
Starting off this list, and at number 10 we have Ilsa de las Munaches in Mexico. And I'm probably saying it wrong, I don't speak Spanish, I'm sorry, but you've all seen these pictures before. And if you haven't, well, get ready to brace yourselves, because this is some pretty creepy stuff. Okay, see, what did I tell you? This is what nightmares are made of, and you guys have seen it before, these pictures. Well, let me tell you how this creepy doll forest started. On this island, a caretaker found a body of a girl in one of the canals. He found the doll floating in the water, and he decided to hang it from one of the trees as some sort of like tribute. He continued to hang thousands of dolls until he drowned in the exact same spot where that girl died. Some people believe that the dolls are evil, while others believe that the dolls keep the island safe. So today a lot of tourists come to visit this island. I personally don't see the appeal. I definitely don't have this creepy doll island on my bucket list, but for those people who visit the island, they say that they can see the dolls move their eyes, heads, and limbs. I mean, no thanks. I guess the dolls must be possessed by evil spirits or something, but I'm not about to go there and find out. I'm not about that life. Up next, number 9, we have the Pine Barrens. The forest spans over 1 million acres, and it is located in New Jersey. According to the local legend, the Jersey Devil is known to roam around this forest. He was born in 1735, except he didn't look like a child. He was born with leather wings, a ghost head, and hooves. He flew up a chimney and into the forest, and he has been killing livestock and creeping out the residents ever since. Locals living near the forest can hear high-pitched screams, and they're too scared to venture into these woods because they don't want to come face to face with this demon. Coming into number 8, we have the Wychwood Forest in England. Hands reaching out and touching you, and a horse-drawn cart carrying a couple of their crying children. Well, these are just a few things that you'll see if you decide for some reason to go inside of these woods. But one of the scariest legends that originated in this forest is about Amy Robsart. She mysteriously died of a broken neck, but she confronted her husband as a ghost and told him that he will join her in 10 days. And sure enough, he died after becoming ill with an unknown reason, but it also said that anyone who walks into this forest and sees Amy Robsart will die shortly after. So yeah, my recommendation would be to stay far, far away from these woods. The Freeton Fall River State Forest is next up at number 7. Now this is pretty unlucky, number 7. This forest is known as a paranormal breeding ground. It is believed to be the shire of a bunch of satanic murders that occurred in the 70s and the 80s. There have been creepy UFO sightings here, poltergeist activity, and fireballs emerging just out of nowhere. The forest is also said to be the home to a race of humanoid creatures known as pickwedges. These creatures look like troll beats that are known to cause trouble. They will intentionally startle people, throw rock or sand in their faces, push or shove them, kidnap them, hurl them off a cliff, wrestle them, or even attack them with knives or spears. These creatures have been blamed for a lot of deaths that have occurred here, and people still report seeing them in this forest.
Number 6. Perfectly severed deer head found on trail. Ugh. I'm a ranger at Yellowstone. A couple weeks ago, I was exploring the Lamar Valley, about 11 miles from the nearest road and even further to the park boundary. There, in the middle of the trail, is a perfectly severed deer head. No blood, no raggedness at the severance. Perfectly intact. Now, this is weird because I have seen wolf and bear spoils, and I used to find cougar prey remains in SD with radio tracking just after the cougar made them. This was not any of those things. The head was completely uneaten, eyes, tongue, everything intact. Even the ravens hadn't touched it yet. No catching, no droppings. Right smack in the middle of the trail, but again, no blood. Even a human doing it made no conventional sense. It was a doe, so it had no antlers, plus why leave it in the trail? Whole thing, even in broad daylight, gave me the chills. Just an ocean of waving grass, bison calmly grazing, and a perfectly clear deer head on the path. Now, this sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, and I am terrified. Number 5. Dead body. I was a wildland firefighter, specifically a hotshot, for the US Department of Agriculture. We saw a lot of backcountry in national forests that no one ever saw. Once, on a fire in South California, we helicoptered deep into the woods, then hiked 8 or so miles. We were way out when we discovered human remains, clothes, etc. We opened the wallet and find a note, then found the thing he used with 1 bullet missing. We examined the skull and discovered the guy used it on himself. Very creepy in person. A crew flew out and investigated, piecing together his ID and missing person reports. They discovered he'd been out there for more than a decade. Number 4. Abandoned tent. The oddest thing was the abandoned camp next to the trail. Camping outside of designated campsites is a big no-no, and I was surprised as one day I was walking and found a tent set up directly next to the trail. The trail ran along a nice stream and was a very tranquil spot. Inside, I found a cloth sleeping bag, some dirty clothes, lots of food, big cans of SpaghettiOs, and what looked like some leftovers from a refried beans and rice dinner, and a teddy bear. Everything reeked of cigarette smoke. I was reluctant to confiscate everything and leave the individual out there with nothing, but I did take all the food and pack it into a secure food storage box. I left a note explaining where I had taken the food and that they needed to move camp. Now, I was unable to return to the tent for 2 weeks, way too long to leave it sitting there next to the trail. It was basically untouched when I returned. Some trail crew folks had checked it out and let me know, but that was probably it. I packed up the rest and hauled it out. I spent some time poking around in the area, but never saw any other signs of life. It was obviously someone who was not prepared for camping out in the backcountry, judging by the food, equipment, and the teddy bear. I just don't know. Everything, clothing, gear, etc. indicated it was just one individual. Number 3. Moving light. Park ranger here. Another ranger and I were out on a search and rescue call once. The missing person was a man in his 20s. He had gone hiking and had not returned the day that he intended to. When we got the call, it was nighttime, but we hiked a few miles and set up camp on a ridge that had a pretty good view. He had gone into the woods prepared, so we decided to wait until daylight before beginning the search. About 2 a.m. I get up and I am peeing when I see a moving light at the base of the cliffs across the valley a few miles away. Looks like a flashlight beam. I tell the other ranger and we make the decision to keep waiting for daylight. The next morning we decide to check it out in the area and bring this guy home. We got to approximately where I saw the light the night before and started calling his name. Soon we find his body at the base of the cliff. He had fallen 60 feet on his head. The body was badly mangled. We radioed back that it has now become a recovery instead of a rescue. At this point, the other ranger yells at me to come look at this. Lying 20 feet from the man's body was his mag light. It seemed odd, but I thought nothing of it until the other ranger reminded me of the light the night before. It kinda gave me the creeps, but I still dismissed it. Before too long, the coroner arrived and inspected the body. After he took the body back to the lab, he said that the man had been dead for at least 48 hours before we found the body. All of a sudden, the oh crap alarm went off in my brain. I knew that it couldn't be possible. I had the coroner review his work, same results. I tried to find an explanation for the light I had seen, perhaps other hikers, but one search and rescue guy had stayed at the only trailhead in the area all night. No one had come or gone. To this day, I have no clue what I saw that night, but it freaked me out. Number 2. The mysterious stranger. I once led a trip to the top of Mount Sterling in North Carolina. It's a tough climb to get to the top and about 6 miles from the nearest road. I was leading a group of 8 middle schoolers and had one co-instructor. We were camping out on the top of the mountain and it was a beautiful night with a full moon. I laid on a hammock enjoying the scenery and noticed something moving on the trail. Bears are common in this area, so I perked up. As I got closer, I could tell it was a person. We were in the middle of nowhere and there was someone hiking up the trail with no headlamp or any gear. They arrived at the top of the mountain where we were and just stopped. I watched as what appeared to be a man survey our camp. I could really only see the outline of him. He stood there for what seemed like 30 minutes but may have been 10. He then turned and sat down under a tree facing our camp. He was sitting up in a way that I knew he wasn't trying to sleep. He just sat there staring at our camp. I had no idea what to do. I decided to wait it out. I waited, just staring at the man while he stared at my camp. This went on until about 3:30 a.m. Then he stood up, took a moment to survey the camp a few minutes longer, and then went back down the trail he came up on. To this day, I have no idea what that was all about, and it freaks me out. That freaks me out too. And coming in at number 1, search for hikers runs through super creepy clearing. There was a group that hadn't been heard from after their scheduled return from a camping trip. A coworker and I headed out in the general direction the group had set off in. We'd been hiking for most of the day and seen nothing. We're about 35 kilometers into the woods at this point, and we start noticing odd things. Sticks carved like spears stuck into the ground, weird carvings in the trees, a children's stuffed animal hanging from a noose up in a tree. This place was nowhere near any roads. It wasn't on regular trails people would go on in the area. The really eerie thing was that everything was freshly carved. Somebody had been there within a couple of hours of us and made these things. I noticed a bit of a shirt that had caught on a small tree and ripped along with some shoe prints. We were thinking, great, maybe we're close to the group, when a radio call comes in though. The group had been found 20 kilometers east of us and they're calling everyone back. So what did we find? I have no clue, but my coworker and I headed out of those woods fast, and yeah, I would too.
Number 10, we have Griffith Park, Los Angeles, USA. This park is a pretty famous tourist destination. People from all over this world will come to this place to see the spot where Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone did some dances from La La Land. Personally, I never saw the movie, so I don't really care. But beyond this forest being blessed by the presence of Hollywood A-listers, it has also been cursed. The park was previously owned by Don Antonio Felice. He was a wealthy man and he had a niece per Tanya. Things were going pretty good for them. They're all rich and stuff. They're living in a massive park. Then the family hit some hard times. Don got smallpox and died in 1863. This would be an even worse outcome for his niece. She thought she was gonna get a big payday when her uncle passed, but turns out he left her nothing in his will, so she put a curse on the whole park. Since then, there have been several murders, fires, and even satanic rituals inside this park. At number 9, we have Eden Park, Cincinnati, Ohio. If you're in Cincinnati, Ohio, chances are you're already having a pretty bad day. You probably just watched the Cincinnati Bengals lose and now you're on your way to watch the Reds do the same. But if you wanted to make your time there a little worse, you might want to take a stroll through Eden Park. This place is apparently haunted by the ghost of Imogene Remus. She was killed in the park by her husband. It was 1927 and she was on her way to the law office to get some divorce papers so she could leave her husband. Well, he didn't like this very much, so he chased her down in his car and shot her dead right in the park. It is said that now the park is haunted by the lady in the black dress. At number 8 we have Elfin Forest, San Diego, USA. A common theme for this list is a lot of gruesome things can happen in a forest. I thought they were all supposed to be cherry picking and picnic, but there's also lynchings and massacres. Who knew? Elfin Forest has a ton of supernatural tales about it. It's said to be the home of mythical creatures. If you're there the right time of year, you can see them frolicking through the forest. Now, if magic monsters isn't enough to get you hyped up, you should go check out this place for something a little more rooted in reality. In the 1800s, the forest was occupied by several different groups of gypsies. Now, gypsies get a very mixed reaction, and apparently the townfolk living close to this forest really didn't like them. They hated them so much that they went in with some pitchforks and torches to drive them all out. Many of the gypsies made it away, but the few that weren't quick enough were killed. The survivors then cursed the land, and if there's anything I don't want to do, it's mess with gypsy curses. Now the forest is said to be super haunted. There's apparently a ghost of a headless horseman riding a black stallion, and some ghostly ladies in red dresses floating all around. At number 7 we have Jack London State Historic Park, Glen Ellen, USA. Jack London is a famous author, so famous that he actually got a whole state park named after him. I mean, if I lived my whole life and did awesome things, so awesome that people wanted to name something after me, I would probably want a burrito chain. But I guess a park is fine too, I just think it's kinda lame. But this park was named after Jack because his family used to live out there on their massive ranch. He was even building his dream home out on this park until a huge fire burned it down. What a bummer. He didn't even get to see it finished before he died. Now the wreckage just sits on the park, and apparently him and his wife were both buried in the park, and now they haunt the burned down house. Like, dude, get over it, the house is gone, you're dead, it's time to move on.
The Deer Head. A ranger at Yellowstone National Park posted the following story on Reddit. They stated that they had been exploring the remote Lamar Valley, situated miles away from the nearest road and the park boundary. While wandering on the trail, the ranger came across a bizarre sight. A perfectly severed deer head in the middle of the path. There's no evidence of blood, and the head seemed to be untouched and intact. The person had previously come across the kills of bears and wolves, and even tracked the kills of cougars in South Dakota, but this was something else entirely. The head was of a doe and didn't have antlers, so kind of unlikely that it was a hunter committed this act, and it makes sense for someone to even leave the head in the middle of the trail. Just a perfectly severed, intact head. Yeah. Pretty weird. Next up we have the booby trap. In April 2012, a US Forest Service law enforcement officer named James Schaufler was on patrol in a popular recreation area located off Big Springs Trail in Provo Canyon, Utah. While on foot, he came across what looked to be a tripwire, and to his horror, he discovered a primitive booby trap that was set to activate when said tripwire was crossed. The device was made of a large rock and had sharpened sticks on it, forming kind of like a spiked ball that of course could hit an unsuspecting person and cause some serious harm. After dismantling the trap, he found another tripwire designed to send someone falling into a bed of sharpened wooden spikes, very Mortal Kombat style. Schaufler's quick thinking and sharp eyesight prevented a potentially very serious incident from happening, as the booby traps were located only half a mile from the recreation area's parking lot. It was fortunate that no one was injured, especially since there was a child's birthday party being held in the area at the time. Yikes. The traps were dismantled, and Schaufler's actions were instrumental, obviously, in keeping people safe while enjoying the area's natural beauty. Thank you, James. The next story comes from us to another Reddit user, Shiny Brian, who picked quite the spot to relieve himself. He had a job fighting forest fires in the Pacific Northwest and described his scariest encounter as such. My scariest wilderness encounter was about 2 a.m. while maintaining fire line on a 300-acre fire caused by a lightning strike. I needed to take a number 1, and the rule is you don't take a number 1 on the fire. So I walked over towards a stump outside the fire line. I was about 50 feet away from the stump when it walked away. It was a black bear. I feel like I would have just shrunk into myself if this ever happened to me. I mean, just seeing a stump you were looking at move, first of all, is scary, and then to see it's a bear, yeah, no thanks. Alright, Lake Crescent in Olympic National Park is steeped in legend and ghost stories. One of the most popular legends surrounding the lake is that it was created when part of Mount Storm King fell onto a battlefield, crushing the combatants and creating the bed of the lake, according to legend anyway. However, a more recent and factual story is that of the Lady of the Lake. In 1940, the body of a woman was found floating in the lake. Her body was eerily well preserved, likely due to the natural process of saponification, which gave her skin a kind of waxy texture. The woman was later identified Haley Latham Illingworth, a local tavern server who had disappeared in 1937. Her husband, Monty, was identified as the culprit after authorities found strangulation bruises on her body. Despite the mystery being solved, though, visitors to the area still report seeing the ghost of her lingering on the shores of Lake Crescent, making it one of Washington's most haunted trails, supposedly. Next up, we have the bear attack. Jordan Carberry, a Canadian park ranger in Bella Coola, British Columbia, had come across some bear cubs in a tree. Never a good sign. You do not want to come across grizzly bear cubs in the wild, as cute as they are, because where they are, the mother is close by, and she does not want to see you. And this was no exception. One of these cubs happened to fall out of the tree and caught the attention of the protective mother bear, who began charging towards him. The grizzly bear tackled him from behind, picked him up by his head. Bear then picked him up again by his thigh and dropped him down repeatedly. Using what he had learned from a defensive training class, though, the park ranger, Carberry, kicked the bear in the face as hard as he could and managed to create enough space to run back to his house. Since he didn't have cell service, though, Carberry actually had to drive himself to the hospital with one arm over his belly, just telling himself repeatedly not to pass out. Despite his injuries, Carberry did recover, and during recovery was quoted as saying he felt fan-freaking-tastic. So, amazing. The last story here, this is a personal story, at least one that happened to a buddy of mine. I call it the Waving Man. So my buddy used to be a camp counselor. So yeah, not a park ranger, but hey, close enough. Anyway, he took kids out on portaging trips. It used to be like days-long trips. We'd canoe, and then you'd traverse through the forest with the canoe, and then you'd canoe again. That's what it's called. Anyway, so one day they're canoeing, they're getting to their next site, and they happen across this man on the side of the shore, and he's kind of asking my buddy, hey, where are you guys camping and all this stuff? And my buddy Max, he doesn't really tell him because obviously he's got kids with him. He doesn't want some guy coming around their campsite. But they make it to their campsite that night. They set up the fire, they set up their tents. The kids go to bed. Him and his fellow camp counselor are in their tent. And then they start to hear what sounds like footsteps kind of walking around their campsite. And they're thinking like, okay, maybe it's one of the kids who's up or something like that. Unzip their tent. Nobody. Totally empty campsite. Now they're obviously a little bit freaked out, right? Zip up the tent again. They hear those footsteps once again. They're like, do you hear that? Yeah, like I hear there's something. And keep in mind, they got kids with them. So they have to, obviously protect the kids. My buddy Max pulls out an axe he had with them, set up a fire, and they just stay up all night, just waiting for whoever this is to come out or, might have to use that axe. They were really freaked out. Anyway, night goes by fine, no one ends up showing up. Head back on their canoes the next morning, and as they're heading down the river, they see that same man they met the day before just on the side of the shore, just waving and smiling at them. So, I don't know. Anyway.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have Through Him. This one comes from Reddit user SuperDan23. Now I thought I'd start off with a really strong one. Hopefully this doesn't creep you guys out too much. SuperDan said, I worked at a summer camp where the cabins were arranged in a circle, a center building that was used for showers and bathrooms. One night, one of my campers, about 12 years old, asked to go to the bathroom, just as we had all gone gotten into bed. I tell him to take his bunkmate and to go quickly. The bathroom building is about 100 feet away. The kids are kind of dorking around like kids do, and they take off for the bathroom running. All of a sudden I hear screams that still haunt me. Hysterical, choking for air, horror movie screams. I jump up and run out, and I see the two boys sitting on the ground right outside the bathrooms, and they are kind of holding each other. After a few minutes they calm down enough and they say they ran through a man. They say he appeared right before they got to the bathroom door and was standing in the doorway. They didn't have enough space to stop, and when they put their hands up they went through him and into the door. They said there was cold air around him and that was it. He was gone. They said he had a suit on and black slicked black hair and was smiling. We had to call the parents and they both went home the next morning. No kid goes home from summer camp, man. It still freaks me out. Next up at number 9 now we have Good Bones. Now this is a short one, but it's packed with just as much creepiness as the rest of our stories in today's video. It comes from Reddit user The Copy Paste Life. They said, our park lets kids from school in so they can look for animals in the forest and the streams. One day a kid finds molars. The teeth look like human molars, but the teacher said it was a deer's. I dismissed it and completely forgot about it. 2 days later they found a corpse with a smashed skull and jaw in another part of the park. All of its teeth were missing. Local newspaper covered the story, but all they had to say was thank the spooky skeletons for good bones and teeth. Okay, so with that story, the bones and teeth and the skull were all creepy, but do you know what else is creepy? That newspaper. Who hears about a potential murder victim and jokes about spooky skeletons? That is really creepy. I'm just saying. Moving on to number 8 now, we have Womp. This one was posted to Reddit by OG Dinosaur. Now he admits that he's not a ranger, but rather an archaeologist who heads out to the wilderness to do studies, but in my opinion his story is too good to miss out. He said a few years back we were doing a massive survey in the middle of nowhere in the interior of BC. All the crew had gone home and it was just my boss and myself left for a few days to follow up and confirm some coordinates and finish some mapping. We head out from the motel an hour or so into the bush, middle of nowhere, along deactivated logging roads. Closest town is miles and miles away. We hike out to this one area we had found a site at a few weeks previously. Now for some reason the whole area just felt off. So we get down to business, and about 15 minutes after being hunched over mapping, there is this weird, deafening whomp sound. Like I could feel pressure in my ears. I immediately looked at my boss about 20 feet away, and he is white as a ghost staring back at me. Standing there, it happens again. Whomp. Ear pressure and chest pressure like I was just squeezed. Chills all over my body and every hair is standing on end. My boss just looks at me and says, let's go. We grab all of our stuff and speed hike back to the truck. We never discussed it again. No clue what it was, but I have never been so freaked out in my life. 10 years later and I still get the chills. Moving on to number 7 now, we have Black Magic. This one comes from Reddit user Rooston Dayard. It's about to step up a gear here, guys. She said, I was a ranger at a coastal park in South Carolina, down on the islands. I saw the aftermath of some truly creepy black magic. When you open the park, you must also begin with a complete park tour, including riding down the beach. Several times in the 2 years I worked there, I came across turkeys chained up and chickens left in homemade crates for the high tide to come in and kill. Strange artifacts would always be scattered around the crest of where high tide hit. Everything from random bones to swatches of clothing could be found. Half the staff that worked there were Gula. They would tell me that was black magic, not to be confused with root magic. Black magic would be the bad kind, where you have to sacrifice life and are asking for something bad to happen. Root magic is a good magic, where you're just asking for love, health, luck, etc., and not sacrificing a life. It always freaked me out seeing it and bummed me out to clean it up.
The Devil's Tramping Ground curses us in at number 6. Located in North Carolina, these woods are known as one of the most haunted places in this state. The Devil's Tramping Ground is located deep within a forest, but it is a perfectly round 40-foot circle, and the circle doesn't have one single flower, weed, or blade of grass. That's because anything that gets planted here will either wither and die. If that doesn't seem strange to you, if you put an object in the circle before sunset, it will violently be thrown out of the circle before sunrise. When dogs get too close to the circle, they will whimper and bark, and they would refuse to go in. People have tried to spend the night night in the circle, but no one has been able to do it, or they have gone insane. It is believed that this is where the devil comes out at night to do his pacing and thinking. Because of this area has a really bad reputation. Well, yeah, no duh. People have seen red eyes glowing there at night, and they can feel like something bad is about to happen. Well, here's a clip of two guys who thought it would be, a great idea to visit the devil's tramping ground. What they found will shock you.
Or had to get out here in a hurry.
The burial ground forest takes us into number 5. Let's travel over to England and into the Epping Forest. This forest is so large that it's become a very popular hideout for criminals on the run, and it's also a very notorious forest for dead bodies. This 6,000-acre forest has been the hideout for a lot of dangerous criminals and murders. So yeah, this definitely isn't a nice place for kids to play in, and on top of that, there are hundreds of dead bodies buried in these woods from gruesome murders. Oh, and a lot of children were targeted here by Ronald Jepson, who was a very sick pedophile and murderer. It is also said that cars parked on Hangman's Hill are said to roll uphill when they're parked in neutral. I don't know why you would ever park your car on Hangman's Hill. I mean, the name alone says it all. The Screaming Woods come onto this list at number 4. Well, this sounds like the absolute worst place to host a camping trip. I mean, am I right? The actual name of this place is Durwing Woods, and it is located in Somerton, England. Hikers have said they can hear blood-curdling screams coming from the forest at night, and they can also hear footsteps and whispers on foggy days. Apparently, a man was captured and killed in these woods by local villagers in the 18th century, and it is believed that his ghost still holds a grudge and will do anything in his power to harm the living. While others believe that the hauntings are caused by 20 ghosts who were found dead in the forest from a massacre that occurred in 1948. Autopsies were done on the bodies, but they couldn't determine a cause of death. The Dow Hill Forest comes crashing on this list like just like that at number 3. And yeah, I'm doing my own sound effects for this one because why not? Well, this forest has its own fair share of gory murders, and lots of people have seen a headless boy wandering around in the trees along the path. This creepy path is known as Death Road, and if you ever find yourself walking around this path, you will feel like you're being constantly watched by something evil. Some people have even seen the red eyes staring at them. There's even a ghost of a woman dressed in gray, and you aren't supposed to look or talk to her. And there is something in the air that will make you feel like you're losing your mind. And for some, the air makes them kill themselves. And now at number 2, we have the Suicide Forest in Japan. Obviously, no haunted forest list could be complete without this infamous forest. The Suicide Forest can be found at the base of Mount Fuji, and it's arguably one of the most scary places in the entire world. There are rumors that the iron in these woods interfere with compasses, which causes hikers to go in the wrong direction, and they will go deeper and deeper into the woods. These hikers will become so lost that they can't find their way out. But what makes things even worse is that the forest has been the site of more than 500 reported suicides since the 1950s. People claim that they can hear their spirits scream throughout the night, and you can hear necks breaking. And yes, this is the infamous forest that, Logan Paul did his shenanigans in. You guys know the whole thing, I'm not gonna get into it. Coming in at number 1, we have the most haunted forest in the world, the Hoia Baciu Woods, located in Romania. It's almost like this guy named the forest after he sneezed. Baciu. Well, if you value your life, you will never ever step foot in these forests, and I'll tell you why. It covers 250 hectares of land, and it is referred to as the Bermuda Triangle of the country. It has a reputation for intense paranormal activity and unexplained things that have happened here. Brave people who have entered these woods have seen ghosts, faces appearing in photos, unexplained figures, and UFO sightings. If you go into this forest, you will feel intense anxiety and feel like you're being watched. People who live near the forest are afraid to go in because they believe the people who visit will never return home. Some of the locals who were crazy enough to go inside complained of having rashes, nausea, vomiting, migraines, burns, scratches, anxieties, and other weird feelings. But get this, some people even believe that the forest is a gateway to another dimension. People have been known to disappear in these woods, and strange lights can also be seen. A 5-year-old girl wandered into the woods and got lost, but apparently she came out of the woods 5 years later, wearing the same clothes, but she actually had no memory of what happened within those 5 years. I mean, I'm just getting goosebumps thinking about it. When I read that, I couldn't believe it.
Number 10. An odd man in the woods. I was a park ranger on a small island, the only year-round resident. I loved the off-season with 400 acres all to myself, no phone, no internet. I was in the old forest one night when I saw a smear of bright white off-trail ahead. I figured it was one of the small herd of white-rumped deer, but it moved up the side of the trail before I could get a better look. I heard a sharp bark and froze, then crept forward a few feet. I reached the fork and was straining to see ahead when I heard the crunch and crack of something in the brush behind me. I spun and saw a pale man, 6 foot or taller, with dark hair, wearing a bright white t-shirt about 30 feet in front of me. He gave me a lunatic grin, barked again, a hard, sharp ha, then turned and ran off into the woods. I stood still, scanning the trees, my hand on my weapon. After not hearing anything for a few moments, I backtracked my way to the main trail, then, terrified, sped walked all the way back to my cabin. I don't know who or what it could have been. The way he was running around off the trail convinced me that he knew the island very well, better than me for sure, and that he was hiding out somewhere, but I never found any evidence of a secret lair, and I never saw him again. Number 9. Small humanoid creature. This happened about 8 years ago when I was 21 years old and working as a camp counselor in New York State. The place is basically a bunch of cabins in the woods on top of a mountain, each cabin half a mile apart from the other, so you're pretty isolated in the woods. One night at about 1 a.m. I was sneaking off to meet my camp girlfriend. Suddenly I heard rustling in the woods and I stopped to investigate it. There are bears / other animals, so I was expecting something like that. Then this 3-foot tall humanoid type thing suddenly jumps out of the bushes and looks at me. It's too dark for me to make out any of its features other than it was standing on 2 feet, had 2 arms, and basically looked just like a miniature person without any features. I was curious to what it was, so I started walking towards it and it spooked, bolting back into the woods. I'll never forget how mechanical it looked as it took off running. I have never seen anything on 2 legs run that quickly, so I was pretty confused about what it was. As much as I try to make sense of it, I still to this day have no idea what it was. It was very human, but too short to be a human, and I don't know how a human could run that fast anyway. Now, I feel like this could have been some sort of animal perhaps, but it's still creepy. Number 8. Crying baby. My grandfather used to be the equivalent of a park ranger down in Mexico. He was in charge of patrolling the farms and lands mainly due to people growing illegal substances. One day, he said he was patrolling this ranch late at night shift and he heard a baby crying. Now the land is pretty flat, so he looked all ways and saw nothing. He thought maybe it was some goats out in the far as they can sound like crying babies, but as he's walking his route, he hears the same sound, looks up in the sky, and swears he saw a witch with black clothing and everything flying towards a mountain. He panicked, ran to his car, and drove off as fast as he could. Now, this could have been a bird or something, but being alone at night outside, your mind can definitely play tricks on you. Number 7. The blue lights. I used to work as a ranger at Philmont Scout Ranch in New Mexico. There's a place on the ranch called Urica Mesa, and there's all sorts of local legends about it being haunted. One of the stories about the mesa is that at night you can see weird lights coming from the top. I've been there for 4 summers and even camped on top of the mesa and had never seen one until one night. A scout troop and I were camped on the back side of the mesa. I hadn't told them any of the haunted stories at this point when one of the kids points up to the mesa and asks, "What's that?" I figured he's seeing some flashlight coming down the trail from the mesa because I know there's supposed to be another group camping with us, so I tell him that. left. I turned to look and the lights weren't coming from where the trail is, they were off to the right and it's not a flashlight. It's like the light was coming from behind the mesa or from a fire that you can't see. Only it wasn't orange-red like firelight, it was blue. Creepiest thing ever, because if the blue lights are real, what else is real? At this point though, I'm still thinking it's the other group, but like 15 minutes later, they roll into camp and we can still see the lights. Spooky.
Now at number 6 is question mark. Honestly, I'm about to tell you the experience of a hunter in a forest who wasn't even sure what he saw, so how am I even meant to label this one? The man was in the deepest parts of the woods near a lake and he'd hunted many times before, but this time things just felt off. For some odd reason he felt like he was being watched, but he tried to just brush it off regardless. He was sat in a tree stand when he heard the howl of a huge creature making its way across the thicket. He initially thought it was just a group of wild hogs, but he realized all the howling was coming from one thing. The creature was moving slowly, it was remaining out of sight, and it was moving through the lake. Mind you, the lake was about waist high on the hunter, so you can imagine just how large this creature was. It was advancing slowly and silently through the water and then dashed into the thicket. The hunter didn't actually manage to see the creature, but when he came back a few days later to get his bag, he found deep claw marks on the tree he'd been using and his bag was gone. And that's all he wrote. Coming in at number 5 is The Witch. Now personally, I think this one is 100% fake. It seems like special effects to me, but you guys can decide for yourselves. Now this video was uploaded by YouTuber True Chooser back in 2010, and it shows a dirt road with woodland on each side of it. In the middle of the road up ahead is this dark grey creature sitting on the ground. Like the body looks clearly human, except its fingers are creepily long and thin, and as the cameraman gets closer, the thing turns around and you can see it's a female with long hair and dark facial features. And then the video just conveniently ends. First of all, if that was real and you saw that sliding across the road, why would you get that close to it? Surely the natural thing to do would be just to stay in your car and maybe run it over. I don't know. Apparently the Witch is from the game Left 4 Dead, and I'm pretty sure it is. Good try, True Chooser, but not good enough. At number 4 is the Michigan Dogman. Why are there so many hybrid human-animal creatures lurking around? I mean, I'm not mad at it, but is it a cause for concern? Maybe. The first ever sighting of the Michigan Dogman was in 1887 when 2 lumberjacks claimed to have seen a massive creature that had the body of a man and the head of a dog. Countless sightings of the beast have been reported for years, and the creature is usually blamed for the death of pets and horses. A photo was submitted by a boy who was just sitting in the back of his parents' minivan, and it's blurry, but you can definitely make out it's an animal of some kind, and it looks massive. If anything, I feel like the head looks like a massive tiger's head rather than a dog's. I don't know which dog looks like that honestly, but it does look bipedal for sure. A sighting in 1977 happened where 2 brothers were biking near Manistee National Forest, and one got left behind, and as he turned around, he saw a face covered in black fur watching him from behind a tree. But the face was a good 7 feet off the ground, and as soon as they made eye contact, the creature ran away. The brother followed him and noticed dark red bands of colored fur on both of his ankles, and I love how this thing could probably take him in a 1v1, but it just ran away scared. I sensed the dogness in him. Maybe he just wanted a friend. Filling our number 3 slot is the Donkey Lady. I've read about a lot of legends. Now I've read a lot of legends in my time here at Top 10, but I've never actually encountered this one, originating in San Antonio, Texas. In the 50s, a woman was really badly burnt in a house fire, and I'm talking 3rd-degree burns everywhere. Her face was disfigured and her toes and fingers burnt off completely, making her feet and hands look like hooves. On top of that, if that wasn't bad enough, both of her children were killed in the fire as well, which was the last straw for the woman, and I'm really not surprised. She slowly descended into madness. Locals in town decided to banish her for her crazy rantings, and she went and lived under an old stone bridge located off Applewhite Road. The bridge is between 2 forests or woodland areas where she usually hides and then attacks passerbys. I mean, should I be saying creature? Would she be a ghost by now? I have no clue. Anyone living in San Antonio, have you witnessed this? Let me know in the comments below. Now at number 2 is the Hodag. Now this one came from Wisconsin folklore and is meant to be a small but fierce animal, quite like myself. Found in forests forests and caves alike. According to an 1893 newspaper report, it was said to have the head of a frog, the face of a giant elephant, short legs with huge claws, the back of a dinosaur, and a spear-headed tail. I don't even get how you can fit an elephant's face on a frog's head, like surely the proportions just aren't possible. Claims about the beast were made by land surveyor and local prankster Eugene Shepard, who gathered a group of people to capture the beast. They said they used dynamite to kill it, and pictures of the charred remains were given to the media. I mean, are we gonna believe unreliable source Eugene? Are we not? It apparently went extinct after its main source of food, all white bulldogs, became scarce in the area. And finally, at number 1 is the Wendigo. Now this is a supernatural beast that comes from Algonquin First Nations folklore in Canada. Woohoo Canada! They live in forests and other wooded areas, but the first thing you'll find out about a Wendigo is that they're a cannibalistic monster that eat and kill anything in their path. In the legend, Wendigos come to be when humans are overtaken by greed or when they're weakened by extreme conditions like cold or hunger. They're known to infect communities and people with the purest form of evil. Miss me with that. Looks wise, they vary. Some are known to be extremely thin, with their skeletons pushing out of their ashy mummy-like skin. Other stories say they're giants who become bigger the more they eat. Their ears are pointed, or they sometimes have antlers coming out of their head, and their eyes are like sunken black holes of death. Certified. They're known to have certain powers, like their senses are heightened to like vampire from Twilight level. They have superhuman strength and stamina that lets them stalk their prey for weeks if they have to, just like the vampires from Twilight. They can move at the speed of the wind and can walk over deep snow or water without sinking, so far the Wendigo is looking like a Cullen. In terms of killing them, you can kill them with a gun or a bat, but more complicated stories about it claim you have to cut its heart out and melt it in a fire. And I mean, good luck getting close enough to it to cut its heart out. Honestly, it'll most likely cut your heart out before you even get that far, so I mean, pick your battles. Starting us off with number 10 is the skunk ape. Late at night, a driver stopped to pee in an undeveloped area. His sister in the car claimed someone's coming as he heard branches snapping in the woods next to them. He looked up to see a dark-colored 7 to 8 foot animal running towards him. As he got into the car and sped away, they saw the giant beast watching them leave. That was the first ever account of someone seeing the skunk ape back in 1989. Known to be Florida's own version of the Sasquatch, and countless people have sent in descriptions and reports of seeing the beast, and they all match up. The thing is bipedal but walks with a bit of a hunch, and as you might have guessed, it's very much a carnivore. The worst bit about this one is that a photo was sent in to the Sarasota sheriff in 2000 of the beast, and it looks like something out of your worst nightmares. Apparently the anonymous person was leaving treats out for it to make it come back. Like, mate, it's a skunk ape, not a cute little fox or something to leave treats out for. Cut that out. Stop leaving treats. Jeez. Coming in at number 9 is the Maryland Goat Man. The title of this article was "Goats Shouldn't Walk on Two Legs," and I 100% agree with that. They shouldn't. Yet somehow one is. Legend has it the Maryland Goat Man is a half-man, half-goat creature who roams the forest of Beltsville with an axe. And there's two versions of his origin story. The first is that a man who kept goats went completely mad after a bunch of teenagers killed his flock. The incident made him bloodthirsty for revenge. But why would a bunch of teenagers kill goats? Like, what would they even get out of that? Is that what the teens are doing these days? Shocking. Shocking. Now the second story is that a scientist was conducting experiments on a goat with human DNA and things went horribly wrong, thus turning the goat into a half-man, half-goat beast. The legend gained a lot of publicity in the 50s, 60s and 70s when a huge German shepherd was found cleanly decapitated in the forest. People have reported seeing him for decades now, and I honestly believe them. But also, if it was created way back when, shouldn't it be dead by now? Like, what's the lifespan of a goat, you guys? Surely it's time has come, surely. At number 8 we have the Demon of Dartmoor. Now legend has it, and it's not even legend, eyewitness reports say that the demon is a massive 4-legged hairy beast with glowing eyes. It's said to have a thick shaggy coat, round ears, and the limbs of King Kong. Exaggeration there, a little bit, but they are strong enough to tear straight through human flesh, so how much was I really exaggerating? Really? Over the years, people have thought it was a large wild cat or dog, some think it's a bear or wolverine. I didn't even know wolverine was real. A falconer who stood 200 meters away from the demon said size-wise it's like a miniature pony and it moved like a feline but reminded him of a bear. Can that description give off any more mixed signals? Seriously. The founder of the National Research Network, Big Cats, even said this thing is definitely not a wild cat or a dog. He went on to say he saw a collie-sized cat in the area 10 years prior, but the demon of Dartmoor is a lot bigger than that, so that's just great. The picture I saw of it makes it look like a mix of a gorilla, a boar, and my ex. Filling our number 7 slot is the Faceless. I feel like I just named a new species of people, like the Faceless. But anyway, this story comes from a member of the Philippine Marine Corps, and he said he went out on patrol after his unit received information about an enemy sighting. After 3 days of camping around bushes in the jungle and forests nearby, they found a figure in the distance. They started approaching the figure slowly, but the closer they got, the more the horror really set in. The person wasn't walking, they seemed to be floating, and that wasn't even the worst part. It was dressed like a normal living person, but it had no face. The soldier went on to say it was like the face of the person had been erased. Its skin was so pale it was almost translucent, like all its blood had been drained. It had bullet wounds all throughout its chest, and at one point it looked straight into the soldier's rifle scope, and the soldier claimed he had never been that scared in his life. Keep in mind this man is on the battlefield, so you can well imagine the fear. Now I'm assuming the soldier saw the ghost or apparition of a dead soldier who had probably bled out from their bullet wounds, but the whole erased face thing is a complete mystery to me. Do you guys have any ideas? Let me know below.
At number 6 we have Highgate Cemetery, London, England. This cemetery was established in the middle of a forest back in the 1800s. The problem with building a cemetery in the middle of a forest is it takes a lot of upkeep, and apparently this was way too much work because it wasn't long before the place was pretty much abandoned and the forest started to take over. It remains a landmark, but a forgotten one. But when it became a hot spot to shoot horror movies, there was a surge of new visitors. This breath of fresh air also brought some new rumors about the park being plagued by supernatural things, mainly vampires. Rumors started to swirl around that some of the graves had vampires in them and that people had spotted a floating pale figure dressed in all black. This got vampire hunters from all over the world all hot and bothered, so they started to travel there to the park, dig up the graves, and stab the dead bodies in the hearts with wooden stakes, just in case, which I totally support. The people are dead, they don't care if you dig them up, and if they are vampires then I want to make sure they're dead. And if vampire hunting does nothing for you, another reason to visit this park is there's famous people buried there. Kinda cool. At number 5 we have Hunting Island, South Carolina, USA. The Hunting Island State Park is not only home to a beautiful lush forest, but also a mysterious lighthouse. Nothing like a good old-fashioned lighthouse ghost. The lighthouse is at the edge of the forest and has a few different specters that have been seen roaming around it. There's one of an old grumpy lighthouse keeper who has never forgiven himself for a young boy drowning on the premises, and the other is of his daughter that killed herself inside the lighthouse. This guy can't catch a break, I'm sorry dude. At number 4 we have the Black Forest, Germany. This place seems to be ripped right out of a fairy tale. We could go on for hours and hours about the different legends involving this forest. It's said to be the home of different species of dwarves, elves, and a whole bunch of other things that coexist. If you're interested in getting some werewolf powers, there's also said to be werewolves in this place. And there's a king who will steal your girlfriend and take her to his underwater world. I don't know if he teaches you how to breathe underwater before he kidnaps you, but there's nothing about that in the brochure. This is the kind of place that I would like to avoid, because I don't want to be the guy who walks into a forest and then some little fairy is like, "You're the chosen one," and then I gotta spend the next 6 months saving some magical beings from a dark lord. Like, I have plans this weekend, I don't have time for this. At number 3 we have the China State Camp Park, San Rafael, USA. It's beautiful, it's right next to the beach, it's the kind of place you go on one knee and propose to the person you want to be with for the rest of your life. But it's also the spot of one of the darkest murders I've ever heard about. A young girl and her family and her boyfriend were all out for a nice family barbecue in the park. Probably had one of those little portable grills, a bunch of burgers, maybe they were gonna roast some marshmallows at the end of the night. Well, for whatever reason, this wonderful evening inspired this young girl and her boyfriend to kill the girl's parents. And instead of roasting marshmallows at the end of the night, they ended up burning her dead parents' body parts on a campfire to try and get rid of the evidence. Aokigahara Forest, Japan. I'm sure a lot of you at home remember when Logan Paul did his little trip over to this forest for some views. The Aokigahara Forest is at the base of Mount Fuji and is better known for its name, the Suicide Forest. It has been the most popular spot in the world for people to kill themselves. People who enter this forest for any other reason, say to go for a hike, might run into the body of someone who went in there to end their own. Police visit this forest often to remove the bodies, but because of the density of the forest and the twisting paths, it can be very hard to locate people's dead bodies. It's also very easy to get lost in there. If all that wasn't enough for you to want to jump out of your skin, then I'll let you know this is also a hot spot for ghosts and demons. Many Japanese legends tell of demons that live in the forest. They say demons corrupt the minds of people, and that's why so many people travel there to kill themselves in the forest. At number 1, we have Yosemite National Park, California, USA. For our number 1 spot, we have one of the most beautiful places in all of America. For real, you cannot come here without gaining a massive appreciation for nature and exploring the outdoors. It's actually breathtaking. Even though this place should be on everyone's travel list, I will let you know there are a few ghosties hiding there. Two of the most famous ghosts that make their home there are Chief Tenaya. He was the former chief of the Awatichi Nation. People are unsure why his spirit is yet to move on to the other side. Some people think he's protecting the park, and other people think he might be a guide for people who get lost in the gorgeous landscape. But for sure, the biggest celebrity you could run into from the spectral realm would be John F. Kennedy. It's said that his ghost has been seen walking around the Alhani Hotel located in the park. If any of you viewers are planning a trip there and you see him, please just walk up to him for me and say, hey, I think you got something on your head. And guys, that is our list, and as I promised, I'm going to be doing more shoutouts for your pets, because I like doing the pet shoutout because then I get to look at cute dogs all day. First, we have Jay Collins' adorable Akita, Mr. Bear. Look at him, he's all decked out, he's got that little fashionable scarf on and this big old smile on his face. Oh my god, I love it. Next, we got Riley Pangili's cute cat Holly, who's all snugged up on the couch with her little toy. Then we have Bailey Carrera's super cute boxer Francis. I also gotta say, Francis is probably one of the best names for a boxer ever. Like, I just love it. I could imagine coming home to his like floppy lips and you're like, Francis. And finally, we have Holly Lure's little puppy Tatiana, who might be the cutest thing I've ever seen in my whole life. And I want everyone to send out so much love to this little puppy because she just had surgery to fix her heart murmur. Oh.